He walked in wearing a faded green military jacket and carrying an old rifle no one recognized. Most of the crowd laughed. Some even pointed. But when the single dad veteran pulled the trigger, everything stopped. What followed wasn't just a shot heard across the range. It was a silence that shook the entire room. The gravel crunched softly beneath Caleb Brooks's worn boots as he stepped out of his dusty Ford pickup. The late afternoon sun spilled golden light across the entrance of Elite Ridge shooting range, illuminating polished vehicles' designer sunglasses and the unmistakable glint of expensive firearms. It was open house day, a rare event, and the parking lot brimmed with competitors, spectators, and enthusiasts hungry for spectacle. He stood there for a moment, his broad shoulders cloaked in an old, faded green military jacket. The name Patch had long since worn away. His dark hair, a touch too long for military regulation, curled slightly at the nape of his neck. Slung over his shoulder was a rifle case that had seen better decades, and at his side walked a girl 9 years old, ponytail bouncing wide brown eyes filled with quiet awe. Her name was Clara, and she was the reason he was here. "You okay, sweetheart?" Caleb asked, his voice low, gentle. She nodded, gripping his hand tighter. "I've never been to a place like this." Caleb smiled faintly. "Neither have I. Inside the range felt more like a country club than a place for firearms. Marble tile met cedar beams, walls lined with autographed celebrity targets, and a reception desk that looked like it belonged in a luxury hotel. Behind the glass counters stood rows of titanium rifles and high-tech scopes, each more intimidating than the last. Heads turned the moment Caleb stepped in. "Whoa. Looks like a war museum threw up," someone muttered. A few younger men chuckled, casting glances at Caleb's ancient rifle case. One of them, lean and clean-cut with a jawline made for television, smirked openly. He was dressed head to toe in branded gear Oakley glasses, a top-tier ballistic vest, and competition gloves that still smelled like plastic wrap. Bo Easton, current champion of Elite Ridge, son of the club president, and a man who never missed an opportunity to show off. Bo walked past Caleb with theatrical slowness, tossing a protein bar wrapper into a trash bin and glancing at Clara with an exaggerated wink. "You sure you're in the right place, old man?" Bo called over his shoulder. "We don't do history reenactments here." The chuckles grew louder. Caleb said nothing. He guided Clara gently toward an empty bench along the observation line. He didn't belong here. He knew that. The polished range, the clean walls, the egos. It was a far cry from the wind-blown ridgelines of Kandahar or the quiet pine woods of Oregon, where he now lived in peace. But this wasn't about him. Clara's small voice rose above the low hum. "Dad, is it okay if I watch from here?" He nodded. "Just stay behind the line. Don't talk to strangers unless they talk nice." She gave him a brave smile and sat hugging a small backpack tightly to her chest. Caleb unslung the rifle case and walked toward the check-in table. The woman behind it, mid-30s, pressed uniform, sharp eyes, stopped typing when she saw him. Name Caleb Brooks. She frowned. "Military ID." He shook his head. "Not anymore." She hesitated, scanning his form, then quietly slid over a waiver. "Emma Caldwell," she introduced herself. "Range commander today. Sign and step through the security check. Standard safety rules." Caleb signed, thanked her, and walked through. The metal detector chirped softly, but he passed without issue. Emma watched him go, her eyes narrowing slightly, not with suspicion, but curiosity. Out on the range, the crowd had gathered around Bo, who was now demonstrating rapid-fire techniques on a digital pop-up course. His shots rang out in quick succession, clean, fast, accurate. Applause followed each target drop. Then, as if rehearsed, Bo turned and caught sight of Caleb standing quietly at lane 7. "Hold up," Bo said loud enough to halt the session. "We got ourselves a volunteer from the Smithsonian." "What's that, Grandpa?" A musket laughter erupted. Caleb calmly laid out his rifle on the bench. It was old. Bolt action. Wooden stock, hand-carved oil darkened from years of sweat and memory. A Remington 700, once military standard, now long outdated. Bo strutted over microphone still clipped to his vest. "Tell you what," Cowboy Bo said, voice booming over the speaker system. "You land a bullseye on that 100-meter target, I'll give you $10,000 right now." Sound fair, gasps and camera phones lifted instantly. A hush fell across the firing line. Caleb didn't even look up, not interested. But before he could turn away, Clara's voice, small, tremulous, floated through the air. "Dad, you can do it." He paused. The memory hit like a punch. His wife's voice years ago whispering, "You're the calm in every storm, Caleb. You never miss when it matters." He turned back toward the bench, chambered a single round, and settled into position. The entire crowd leaned in. Even Emma Caldwell stepped forward, eyes fixed on him now. No tech, no smart scope, no wind meters, just breath, timing, and instinct. The crack of the rifle split the silence like a blade. The crowd gasped. The screen lit up bullseye, not just a hit. Dead center. Cleaner than any of Bo's had been all afternoon. Bo's smile evaporated. His face tightened. People clapped. One man whistled. And for the first time in years, Clara laughed out loud. Bo Easton's jaw tensed as the final ripple of applause faded. The shot had been too perfect, too fast, too effortless. That kind of bullseye didn't happen by luck, and definitely not by someone dragging around a museum rifle with a military haircut from 2 wars ago. He pasted on a smirk, but behind his sunglasses, his eyes sharpened like razors. Bo wasn't just the reigning champion, he was the brand of Elite Ridge. His face was on the brochures his videos ran before every training class, and his father's signature was etched into the cornerstone of the building. This range was his stage, and Caleb Brooks had just stolen the spotlight. Bo turned back toward the crowd, raising his arms like a performer calling for encore. "All right, folks," he called, his voice amplified by the clip-on mic. "Let's hear it for the legend from the woods." The audience chuckled. A few clapped politely again, but there was a noticeable shift in energy. More than a few eyes were now on the quiet man in the faded jacket, who had simply picked up his brass casing and walked back to his daughter like nothing had happened. Bo's grin flattened. That wouldn't do. He leaned into the microphone again. "Tell you what, let's make things interesting." Caleb had just zipped his rifle case and was helping Clara back into her hoodie when Bo's voice rang out again. "Hey, Green Jacket, you walk in here, steal a bullseye, make my fans question my crown." He paused dramatically. "Let's settle this properly." Caleb turned slowly. Clara looked up at him, worried. Bo gestured toward the digital board behind him. "Official challenge. 10 stations, 10 weapons, 10 styles. You and me. Head to head." A buzz stirred the spectators. Some pulled out their phones, others whispered. No one had ever publicly challenged Bo at his own range. "I'll put up 100 grand. Bo added, letting the number ring in the air. "You miss a single round? You walk away with nothing. Hit them all, and the money's yours." Caleb didn't answer. His face remained unreadable, but Clara could see it. His jaw tightened just slightly, not with anger, with restraint. Emma Caldwell watched from the control room above the firing line. Her arms were folded, eyes fixed on Caleb. There was something about him. The precision, the calm, the lack of bravado. It wasn't just skill, it was discipline. That man wasn't just a hobbyist. He had trained for that shot. She picked up her tablet, pulled up the registration log, and searched his name again. Brooks Caleb. No rank listed. No veteran status checked. No background detail at all. Odd, she muttered. Down below, Caleb finally looked Bo in the eyes. What exactly are you trying to win? Son Bo grinned. Entertainment, competition, and maybe just a little humbling. Caleb sighed. I didn't come here for a show, right? Bo said mockingly. You just came to haul out a dinosaur rifle and show up the professionals in front of their families. Sure, the insult wasn't subtle. Clara looked up at her father. Dad, you don't have to. He crouched beside her, resting a hand gently on her shoulder. What would Mom say right now? Clara blinked. She'd say, ignore bullies. Caleb chuckled softly. She would. But she also said one other thing, remember? Clara bit her lip, then whispered, don't let truth stay buried. He gave her a gentle nod, then stood and faced the crowd. You want a competition, he said to Bo. We'll do it your way. 10 stations, 10 styles. But no money. Bo raised an eyebrow. What's the matter? Don't think you'll win. I'm not here for prize money, Caleb said. His voice was quiet, but it carried. But if you're going to humiliate someone, make sure it's not in front of their daughter. The line struck deep. A few people even murmured an oof. Then Caleb added, if I win, you donate your $100 grand to the PTSD Youth Foundation. Bo blinked. What you heard me, Caleb said calmly. That money doesn't go to me, it goes to kids. Some of them have seen more fire than you'll ever hear echo in this range. Emma raised her eyebrows. So he was military, the kind who doesn't flash it. Bo hesitated, glancing around as if calculating PR value. Then he laughed. Fine. You're on Hero. He reached out to shake hands. Caleb did the same, firm, simple no performance. As the crowd buzzed with excitement, Clara squeezed her backpack and looked up at her father with something he hadn't seen in her eyes for years. Pride. Later that evening, in a quiet stretch of Oregon woods, 40 miles from town, Caleb unlatched the door to a small steel shed beside their cabin. Inside was a dusty safe. He twisted the combination, opened it, and stared at the contents in silence. A worn tactical logbook, a faded photo of a woman with wind-blown hair and laughing eyes, a ring blackened from smoke, a folded uniform patch, SEAL Team 4, and beneath it all, wrapped in a linen cloth, an old military-issued scope, one not made for civilians. He took the ring and slipped it onto his finger, rubbing it with a thumb. His voice was barely a whisper. I didn't come to fight Sarah, but maybe this fight needs to happen. Clara stood quietly behind him. Mom would have smiled today. He turned. Yeah, she used to say. Your father's aim is sharper than pain. I think I know what that means now. He smiled. Then he reached into the safe, pulled out the old scope, and attached it to the Remington. Tomorrow would be the first day of practice. Not for money. Not for pride. But for a promise that had once been whispered between two people under a war-torn sky. The sun dipped low behind the pine-covered hills surrounding Elite Ridge shooting range, painting the sky in amber streaks. But inside the facility, the air was crackling, not from the echo of gunshots, but from rumor. Word had spread like wildfire. A man in a green jacket, a bolt-action dinosaur rifle, a single shot cleaner than Bo Easton had ever managed, and now a public challenge for 10 stations. By the time Emma Caldwell walked back into her office, 3 staff members had already knocked on her door with questions. Was it staged? Was he military? Why isn't he in the member database? She ignored them all. The moment her door shut behind her, she sat down and pulled up the security logs. Her fingers moved quickly, calling up every camera angle from Lane 7, time-stamped to Caleb's bullseye shot. She watched the footage 3 times. No flinch, no wobble, controlled breath, measured pause. 1 shot. Perfect impact. She leaned back in her chair and exhaled. This man wasn't a hobbyist. This was muscle memory. A rhythm built from thousands of repetitions under pressure most civilians couldn't imagine. She pulled up the registration terminal again. Name Caleb Brooks, ID. None provided background unlisted membership. Guessed Emma's frown deepened. There should have been a flag, a marker, any indication of former service. She opened the regional veteran database, not the public one, but the one with extended clearance she still had from her time in procurement. She entered his name. No matches found. She paused, then tried again this time, running through the Department of Defense's inactive personnel files. Still nothing. That didn't make sense. If he was military, and she was now certain he was, he should be somewhere. Unless... Emma sat up straighter. There were only a few explanations for someone with that level of skill and no paper trail. Classified. He wasn't just a soldier. He was someone trained to disappear. Someone like she had once heard rumors about SEALs, Special Reconnaissance Black Ops units, whose names never made it to press releases or welcome home ceremonies. She closed the laptop slowly, her thoughts racing. Who was Caleb Brooks? Meanwhile, in a diner off the edge of Highway 22, Bo Easton sat slouched in a booth, swirling his drink with the straw, like it had personally offended him. 3 of his friends sat across from him, still dressed in their high-performance shooting gear, laughing too loud, replaying the moment on their phones. Dude, the way that guy didn't even blink. He just walked up and bam, one of them mimicked the shot. I swear, it looked like something out of a war movie. Yeah, man, another said. Where'd he come from? Dude's not even online. I searched Facebook, Insta, nothing. He's like a ghost. Bo slammed his glass down. He's a poser. Lucky shot. That's it. Come on, bro. Even you gotta admit I don't have to admit anything, Bo snapped. This is my range. My name. And some woodland, nobody isn't going to walk in here with a farm rifle and turn me into a joke. His friends fell silent. Bo leaned forward, voice low. We're not losing this challenge. Got it. One of them nodded slowly. What are you thinking? Bo didn't answer, but his eyes narrowed, and the look in them was sharper than any round he'd ever chambered. Back in the quiet of the woods, Caleb stood beneath the porch light of his cabin, oiling the bolt assembly of his rifle. The sound of metal on cloth soothed him more than any radio ever could. Clara sat cross-legged beside him, a notebook open on her lap, pencil in hand. She was copying something carefully from an old folder, her mother's therapy journal. It was part of her healing now. After the fire, after the loss, words had become her ladder out of the dark. Dad, she said gently. Yeah, sweetheart. What if? Bo cheats. He looked up. Why do you ask? I don't know. He just looked like the kind of guy who thinks winning is more important than anything else. Caleb considered that. There are people like that. But the truth always has a way of showing up. Clara nodded, then asked, Do you think Mom would have liked the way you shot today? Caleb paused. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a crumpled photograph, weathered from years in the field. It showed a young woman in scrub's arms around a younger, smiling Caleb in uniform. She would have said, I hesitated a half-second too long, he said with a smile. Clara giggled. But she'd be proud you stood up to someone like Bo. He set the rifle down and looked into his daughter's eyes. I didn't stand up to him for pride or ego. I did it because someday you'll be in a world full of people like him. And I want you to remember that silence doesn't mean weakness. She nodded slowly. Then after a beat, When's training start? Caleb smiled. Right now. He picked up a stick from the ground and handed it to her. First lesson. Sight alignment. She laughed. With a stick, every great sniper starts with a steady heart. The tools come later. Back at Elite Ridge, Emma Caldwell descended the stairs from her office and walked out onto the now empty range. The lights were dimmed, but the air still carried the echo of the day's drama. She knelt at lane 7 and ran her hand along the bench where Caleb had rested his rifle. Something about him tugged at a long dormant part of her, a part that once believed in quiet strength, in men who didn't boast, who let their actions speak in precise, perfect silence. As she stood up, she looked toward the shadows of the target still standing at the far end, and for the first time in a long while, she found herself smiling without knowing why. By the time the weekend sun rose over the rolling hills of Oregon, the challenge had become a wildfire. Local news stations were already teasing it. Unknown marksman shocks. Champion $100,000 challenge announced at Elite Ridge. Gun forums speculated wildly. Was Caleb a retired sniper, a government ghost, a YouTube prankster? Even without social media, Caleb's name was spreading. At the cabin, however, the world felt quiet. Just the creak of pine trees, the soft clink of coffee mugs, and the rustle of Clara's notebook as she sat at the breakfast table sketching targets in pencil. She had even drawn her own scoring grid and labeled the bullseye for Mom. Caleb poured coffee into a metal thermos, his gaze distant. The challenge wasn't just public. It was emotional territory he hadn't dared step into in years. Competition used to mean survival. Every shot once determined whether a teammate lived or died. Now it felt personal in a different way. "Are we going to do it?" Clara asked quietly. He turned to her. "Do it the challenge. The 10 stations. The $100,000 thing. I already told them the money goes to charity. I'm not asking about the money, Dad." Clara set her pencil down and looked at him steadily. "I'm asking if you're going to fight back." He sat down across from her. Her face was so much like her mother's at that age, sharp-witted, open-hearted, quietly brave. "You think I should?" he asked. Clara nodded. "I think Mom would want people to know what kind of man you are." That silenced him. Outside the window, morning fog clung to the trees. Caleb's fingers brushed against the thermos. Then slowly he nodded. "All right," he said. "We'll prepare. But we'll do it right. One station at a time. One skill at a time." "You in?" Clara grinned. "I'll be your spotter." Back at Elite Ridge, the air smelled of rubber mats, oil, and tension. Emma Caldwell stood in the conference room facing Bo Easton, his father, and 2 board members. Bo lounged in his chair, tossing a stress ball from hand to hand, acting more like a reality TV contestant than the face of the range. "I'm not sure this is smart," Emma said, arms folded. "What, letting some nobody embarrass himself?" Bo snorted. "Please, I'm doing him a favor." His father, a thick-necked man in a monogrammed blazer, frowned. "Bo, if this goes south, it won't." Bo snapped. "I've already picked the weapons and the order. He won't last past Station 4. Emma's eyes narrowed. "Picked. You're choosing the weapons," Bo grinned. "Club champion's privilege. That's not in the rules." "Maybe not, but it's in the show. This is marketing gold, Caldwell. We don't just run a shooting range, we run an experience." Emma felt her jaw clench. The whole setup reeked of ego. She didn't trust Bo to play fair. Not after what she'd seen, the smugness, the need to dominate, the way he looked at people like they were props. And yet part of her was curious. If Caleb was truly who she suspected, then maybe this wasn't a humiliation at all. Maybe it was a reckoning. That evening, Caleb stood on a rise overlooking the forest clearing behind his cabin. Brady Cook, his former SEAL spotter and oldest friend, leaned on the bed of his truck, arms crossed. "You sure you want to do this?" Brady asked. Caleb loaded a mag into an old Sig Sauer. "No," Brady chuckled. "Then why are we here?" "Because Clara asked me to." Brady nodded. "That kid of yours, she's got your stubbornness. She's got Sarah's courage." They stood in silence for a moment. Then Brady picked up a clipboard. "All right, here's what Bo picked for the first 5 stations. Some of it's reasonable M4 AR-10 bolt-action .308. But then it gets weird. A .22 long-range trick shot. A lever action at 300 yards. Trying to stack the odds, Caleb muttered. Brady smirked. Trying to look good. Losing. He's scared. I don't care about him, Caleb said, checking his sights. I care about what Clara sees. Brady raised an eyebrow. You ever going to tell her the truth about your last mission? Caleb paused. Not yet. Why not? Caleb looked out over the tree line. Because she still sees a hero. Brady didn't argue. He knew the story. The fire. The mission that went wrong. The name Caleb carried with him like a scar beneath his skin. And he knew this challenge wasn't about reputation. It was about redemption. At the same time, in a quiet upstairs room above the Elite Ridge control office, Emma Caldwell opened an old steel box she hadn't touched in years. Inside was her own service patch. 1st Marine Division. Fire Control Unit. Afghanistan. She had known men like Caleb. The ones who didn't boast, didn't show off, didn't wear their service like a medal, but carried it like a grave marker. She picked up her phone and dialed a contact in D.C. Hey, she said when the line connected. I need a name looked up. Brooks. Caleb Brooks. Former SEAL, I think. Maybe Black Ops. Can you check the off-books database? The man on the other end paused. You're digging deep, Emma replied softly. He's the quiet kind. I just want to know how deep it goes. Back at the cabin, Clara sat on the porch swing, listening to her dad and Brady, out in the field, calling wind and reading shot groupings. She held the ring her father had pulled from the safe the night before. It was blackened, scorched, but somehow whole. She slipped it over her thumb and whispered, "For Mom." Then she opened her notebook to a fresh page. Across the top she wrote, Quiet Aim, Day 1. Lesson 1. Heartbeats don't lie. Caleb Brooks had not opened the old safe in nearly 6 years. Not since the night the fire took Sarah. Not since the folded flag. Not since the war ended in every way that mattered. But now the lock clicked open again, like a gate to a memory that had never stopped whispering. Inside, nothing gleamed. There were no medals, no framed certificates, just the essentials kept out of sentiment and something deeper, something sacred. The first thing his fingers touched was the logbook, tattered at the corners, military green. Inside were notes scribbled in pencil wind formulas, trajectory adjustments, atmospheric corrections, even diagrams of mountain ranges. Pages worn thin from battle and time. He placed it on the wooden table. Next, he lifted out the photograph, Sarah's photograph, taken the week before his final deployment. She was sitting cross-legged on a picnic blanket with Clara in her lap, her hair wild in the wind, laughing at something Caleb had said off-camera. She looked alive, not like a memory. Caleb swallowed. At the bottom of the safe sat a ring blackened from smoke, its engraving still legible inside. Come home to love, not silence. He held the ring in his palm, closed his eyes, and let the weight of it center him. Behind him, Clara stood silently barefoot on the wood floor, her hair still damp from the rainstorm earlier that afternoon. She said nothing, just waited. Her father was somewhere else, and she knew better than to interrupt when he went there. Finally, Caleb spoke. When I was deployed, he said, voice soft, but steady. Your mom used to send me voice messages. She hated writing letters. She said paper couldn't carry tone. Clara stepped closer. I remember her voice. I used to fall asleep to it. She had a saying, he continued. The world's loudest men never hit their targets. She believed in quiet strength, in aim born of patience. Clara placed her small hand over his. She believed in you. He opened his eyes and nodded. She did. And before she died, she asked me for one last thing. What was it? Caleb stared at the ring. To show Clara what strength looks like when it heals instead of hurts. Clara didn't answer. She reached into her backpack and pulled out her mother's old therapy binder, thick water-warped from the fire, but still legible. She had been reading it every night since the day Caleb agreed to the challenge. Mom wrote something on the last page, Clara said. Caleb turned the page slowly. The handwriting was shakier than usual, done in a hurry perhaps, or in pain. He never misses what matters. Teach Clara to aim with love. Caleb's throat tightened. He took the logbook and laid it beside the binder. Then slowly he placed the ring on his finger again, for the first time since Sarah's funeral. I made her a promise, he said. And I'm going to keep it. Over the next week, the clearing behind their cabin transformed. Brady Cook brought equipment. Steel targets, wind flags, makeshift barricades. One day, it was a moving target. The next, a timed blind shot. They trained like ghosts, early, quiet, efficient. But this wasn't just tactical. It was personal. Every station Bo had listed was dissected. Caleb didn't just rehearse technique, he revisited memories. Each gun brought something back. The AR-10 took him to Fallujah. The bolt action reminded him of the Andes border mission. The .22 long-range shot recalled that one night in Ukraine, when the difference between failure and survival was a single breath in cold fog. Clara was there through it all. She carried the logbook like a Bible, took notes, called wind, read angles from tree movement. She didn't always get it right, but Caleb never corrected her harshly. Precision grows from patience, he would say. Brady, who had never been a father himself, began teaching Clara, too, how to calibrate scopes, zero optics measure humidity. He nicknamed her Little Spotter. One evening, as the last rays of sun melted into dusk, Clara stood by a haystack squinting through binoculars. Wind's picking up from your 7 o'clock, Dad. About 3 knots, Caleb looked over. What makes you think that the leaves, she said, pointing to a patch of trembling birch. And the way the flag behind you moved when Brady yawned. Brady barked out a laugh. She's better than I was in Panama. Caleb chambered around, adjusted 2 clicks to the right, and fired. Ping. Dead center. Clara didn't cheer. She simply smiled. That was her way, now quiet like him. But that night, when he tucked her into bed, she whispered, "You're keeping the promise." He kissed her forehead gently. "I'm trying, baby girl." Elsewhere, Emma Caldwell stared at her screen in disbelief. The voice on the other end of the line, a retired Navy intelligence officer, had finally gotten back to her. "Are you absolutely sure?" she asked. "I shouldn't even be telling you this," the voice said. But yes, Caleb Brooks existed. SEAL Team 4, Shadow Unit, no media presence, no civilian honors, 5 tours, 2 ghost ops, and then off-grid after the embassy fire. They wiped his record for the safety of others. Emma leaned back in her chair, eyes wide. So why's he resurfacing now? The man hesitated. Because men like that don't resurface, unless it's for something more important than themselves. Emma stared out her office window, her reflection staring back in the glass. A woman who had once fought on front lines, now surrounded by bureaucrats and brand ambassadors. She whispered to no one, "What promise are you keeping, Mr. Brooks?" On the final day before the public challenge, Caleb stood at the center of the makeshift training range. Brady approached him with a grin. "You're dialed in." "I'm not shooting for score," Caleb said. Brady nodded. "I know. You're shooting for her." Caleb looked toward the cabin porch. Clara was standing there barefoot again, holding her mother's journal. She waved. He waved back. Then, with practiced hands, Caleb flipped the safety, raised the rifle, and exhaled. The shot rang out, not for glory, not for headlines, but for a promise. For 2 days before the challenge, Elite Ridge Shooting Range had never felt more divided. On the outside, everything looked immaculate. fresh painted walls, perfectly calibrated lanes, gleaming display cases. But beneath the surface, a quiet tension coiled tighter with each passing hour. Bo Easton stood in the center of the range's tech room, arms crossed, as he watched a nervous young technician plug a USB drive into the central control system. "You're sure this will work?" Bo asked, voice low and loaded. The tech, barely 22, red hoodie fingers trembling, nodded. "Yes, sir. Like we discussed, the lane calibration will appear normal to the naked eye, but the inner margin on Station 4 will drift left by 2.3 degrees. That's enough to throw him off by a hair, but not enough to trigger system errors." Bo smirked. Perfect. And the sensors on Station 6, timed delay. His trigger pull will register late by 0.07 seconds. Just enough to miss the moving target. Bo leaned in, eyes gleaming. Good. When he misses, he'll look sloppy. And the crowd will forget all about the forest sniper routine. The tech hesitated. "This isn't illegal, right? I mean, it's just a glitch." Bo's smile tightened. "It's just good showmanship. We're not at war here. We're at a brand event." The tech gulped and said nothing more. Outside the room, the sound of target practice echoed faintly. Pop, pop, ping, followed by applause. Someone was already warming up. Bo didn't care. He wasn't here to practice. He was here to control the narrative. At that same moment, Caleb Brooks stood quietly near Lane 9, his rifle resting on the bench beside him. He wasn't shooting yet, just watching. His eyes scanned every inch of the range, the wind flags, the lighting angles, even the reflection from the ceiling-mounted cameras. Years of training had made him fluent in environments. It was never just about the target. It was about everything around it. He noticed small things. Station 4's target rack looked recently adjusted. The electronic readout at Lane 6 flickered once when Bo walked by. And the technician Bo had been talking to kept glancing toward Caleb, then away. He said nothing. Instead, he ran his fingers along the wood of the Remington stock, grounding himself in something real, something untouched by ego or circuitry. Clara stood behind the glass divider holding a notebook and stopwatch. She was dressed in her best hoodie and a baseball cap that once belonged to her mother. She looked like a spotter in training from another world, too young, too brave, too wise. "Wind from 3 o'clock, she said softly. "Humidity's rising." Caleb gave her a small nod. Emma Caldwell stood a few lanes over arms, folded, observing everything. She wasn't wearing her usual range uniform today. Instead, she wore jeans, a black zip-up jacket, and the look of someone who had once worn a different kind of uniform. She hadn't spoken to Caleb yet. Not directly. But she had watched. Closely. And the more she watched, the more certain she became. He wasn't trying to win. He was trying to prove something else. As Caleb adjusted his rifle, Emma walked over, stopping just short of the firing line. "Station 4's target rig got new hardware," she said casually. Caleb didn't look up. "I noticed." Emma glanced down. Lane 6's delay sensor was flagged for recalibration last week. Still hasn't been fixed. "I noticed that too." She raised an eyebrow. "You planning to say anything?" "No," Caleb replied. "I plan to shoot anyway." Emma crossed her arms. "You're not curious why that might be?" "I'm not here for drama, ma'am. I'm here for my daughter." That answer stopped her. She looked over at Clara, who was quietly timing wind gusts with her phone. Emma's voice softened. "She's watching everything you know." "I know." Emma hesitated, then lowered her voice. "I looked you up." Caleb finally turned to her. "And couldn't find you. Not in any public record. But you don't shoot like a civilian." "I'm not." Emma nodded slowly. "You could have made a fortune training private contractors. Why live in the woods?" "Because peace doesn't shout," Caleb said. It whispers. For a moment, their eyes held. Emma saw something in his face, calm, restrained, but beneath it, a weariness that went deeper than any war. It was the look of a man who had carried burdens without ever handing them off. She stepped back. "Good luck tomorrow." "Luck doesn't matter," Caleb replied. "Only truth." That night, Bo reviewed his script. Not a shooting script, a press release draft. Elite Ridge's reigning champion Bo Easton retains title in decisive victory over mysterious veteran. He grinned to himself. By morning, the stage would be set, but in a quiet clearing behind a cabin in the woods, another kind of preparation unfolded. Brady Cook placed a final steel target in the moonlight, marking its center with chalk. Caleb knelt beside Clara, showing her how to adjust a digital rangefinder. "You remember what I told you about Station 4, he asked. "Check for target lean, confirm baseline, then trust the shot." "Good." "And Station 6, trust your timing, not the machine." Caleb smiled. "You're better than most spotters I ever had." Clara grinned, then grew quiet. "Dad, yeah, are you scared?" Caleb thought for a moment. "Not of the challenge. Then what of what it means? If I miss?" Clara tilted her head. "You told me it's not about winning." "It's not." "Then missing doesn't change anything." He looked at her. Really looked. This girl, his daughter, was carrying the kind of wisdom that had taken him years to earn. She wasn't healing from trauma with therapy alone. She was healing by watching him stand tall. He nodded. "You're right." Clara stepped closer, reached into her jacket and pulled out her mother's ring, the one Caleb had given back to her last week. She pressed it into his palm. "Wear it tomorrow," she said. "For both of us." The morning of the challenge dawned still and cold. Clouds hung low over Elite Ridge shooting range, casting a silver wash across the concrete and steel. Inside the gates, a crowd had already gathered: spectators, reporters, hobbyists, and veterans. Some came for the drama. Some came to see the mysterious man in the green jacket. Most came expecting Bo Easton to dominate. Caleb Brooks arrived the way he always did, quietly. No entourage, no gear cart. Just Clara beside him carrying his rifle case with both arms, her boots crunching against the gravel. Her father hadn't said much on the drive in. He didn't need to. His silence was full of purpose. Clara glanced up at him. "Ready?" Caleb nodded once. Emma Caldwell met them at the entrance. Today she wore her full-range commander's uniform, but her eyes were warmer than before. "You're cleared," she said, holding out his competitor badge. "Station order hasn't changed. You'll alternate with Bo. Each of you takes a turn per station. Your scores are tracked in real time. Final tallies at the end." Caleb took the badge, but said nothing. Emma added more softly, "If you feel something's off with the equipment." "I'll adjust," he replied, then looked her in the eye. "Thank you for watching." She gave a half nod, part respect, part warning, and stepped aside. Station 1, AR-10, standing position 200 meters, a rapid-fire accuracy test. Bo went first, stepping up to the lane like he was born there. His movements were crisp, practiced. The crowd clapped before he even lifted the rifle. Crack, 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 crack. All 4 targets dropped cleanly. 10 points, the announcer boomed. Bo turned to the crowd with a wink, holding up the rifle like a trophy. Then it was Caleb's turn. He stepped to the line, slow and unhurried. No flair. No dramatic pose. He chambered around, adjusted his grip, breathed, crack, 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 crack. All 4 targets dropped just as clean, but without fanfare. There was a pause from the audience, then scattered applause. Some of the veterans nodded. They could tell. The rhythm in his shot wasn't competitive, it was calculated, born in chaos, refined in calm. Bo didn't clap. He just smiled a little too hard. Station 2, 9 missile time to draw. Bo's time 2.08 seconds. Caleb's time 2.15, the crowd murmured. Emma, watching from the observation deck, didn't say a word, but her pen tapped against her clipboard a little faster now. Station 3, moving target side angle M4 carbine. Bo nailed his run. So did Caleb. Tension rippled through the crowd. The score was neck and neck. For the first time, people realized this wasn't going to be a rout. It was a war of inches. Clara stood behind the glass, her hands balled into fists inside her sleeves. She didn't cheer. She didn't blink. She just believed. Station 4, scoped bolt action 250 meters, the rigged station. Caleb stepped up second. Bo had already gone, scoring 9.6 out of 10. Clara leaned in, watching her father's every move. Caleb examined the scope, ran his fingers along the mounting rail, tilted his head just slightly to the left. The target rack looked off. He didn't adjust it. Instead, he exhaled twice. His second breath was longer, slower. A recalibration. His right hand dropped slightly beneath the stock. And then crack. The screen registered 10.0, a perfect shot. The crowd erupted in cheers this time, not for the score, but for the silence that came before it. Bo's jaw twitched. Emma narrowed her eyes. Station 5.22, long-range precision. Bo hit 8.3. Caleb hit 9.9. At this point, whispers turned into words. Who is this guy? Is he military? That wasn't luck. Did you see his stance? My brother shot like that when he came back from Afghanistan. Veterans in the crowd began leaning forward. This wasn't just a contest. It was a resurrection. Station 6, timed sensor target semi-auto rifle. The station Bo had tampered with. Bo went first, 10.0, his fastest time yet. Caleb stepped forward, shouldering the rifle slowly. As he aimed, Clara noticed something strange. The blinking light on the sensor pad wasn't in sync with the calibration screen. She looked up. Dad. Too late. Crack. A slight delay. The bullet still hit, but the system registered 8.1. The crowd winced. Bo smiled, stepping just close enough to whisper, "Guess the nerves are showing." Caleb didn't respond, but from the control deck, Emma wrote something down, and her fingers tapped a hidden switch beneath the observation table. Station 7 and 8 followed. Both close. Both clean. Bo's grin started to fade. Caleb's rhythm stayed the same. Steady. Unshaken. At Station 9, an offhand iron sight drill, Bo stumbled. Just a fraction. A single target grazed, not dropped. The score difference was now razor thin, and they were heading into the final station. Backstage behind the firing line, Bo paced like a wolf. The sabotage hadn't stopped Caleb. If anything, it had only sharpened the crowd's attention. And now, he was losing the room. He turned to the technician. Add a wind gust to the simulation on Station 10, just enough to throw him. The tech hesitated. That's not allowed. Do it, Bo growled. But behind them a voice cut through. That won't be necessary. Bo turned and froze. Emma stood there, arms folded. I've recorded every calibration, every adjustment, she said. And if I see one more anomaly, the entire event becomes an official investigation. Bo's face flushed. You can't prove I don't need to, Emma said, because I'm not here for you. She looked toward the glass where Clara stood, her eyes locked on her father. I'm here for her. The final station loomed like a mountain over the crowd. Station 10, precision long range. Shot McMillan, TAC-50, target 500 yards. One shot. No do-overs. Caleb Brooks had never fired this weapon in public. In fact, no one here had seen this rifle used outside of a YouTube documentary or a military archive. It wasn't a hobbyist's weapon. It was a war instrument. Brutal. Elegant. Demanding. The announcer's voice crackled through the overhead speaker. This is it, ladies and gentlemen. The last shot. The decider. Bo Easton was up first. He strutted to the platform, adjusting his custom gloves, winking to a woman in the front row. The technician behind the glass activated the digital crosswind simulation, per Bo's earlier request. There was a subtle gust engineered artificial, but enough to nudge a less experienced shooter off-center. Bo compensated quickly. He had practiced this rifle more than anyone else on the circuit. He exhaled. Boom! The round flew. The digital scoreboard blinked. 9.7. The crowd applauded loud and impressed. Almost no one noticed the tiny swirl in the wind flag. Almost no one. But Caleb. He was already watching the treetops outside the open bay range, reading the rhythm, like he always had. Caleb stepped to the platform slowly, Clara walking behind him, holding the logbook to her chest like a sacred text. His rifle rested across his arms like a relic from a different world. The TAC-50 had been issued for international counter-sniper missions. Now in his hands it felt like something quieter, not a weapon, but a promise fulfilled. He lay prone on the mat. Clara crouched beside him. Winds shifting again, she whispered. You'll need to lead half an inch left. He adjusted 2 clicks. Then he reached up slowly and removed his left glove. From his coat pocket, he pulled out the blackened ring Sarah had once worn, the one Clara had returned to him the night before. Caleb slipped it onto his left ring finger. Clara blinked. Why now? He looked at her. Because I don't shoot alone. Then he lifted the rifle, aligned the scope, and went completely still. The entire range went silent. Even bow arms folded in the back stopped smiling. The flag rippled once. A hawk soared above the tree line. Caleb's breathing slowed. Once. Twice. Then Clara's voice rose softly, barely more than breath. Take the shot, Dad. He pulled the trigger. Boom! The recoil rippled through the concrete. The crowd gasped as the screen flickered, then blinked bright white. 10 points over bullseye. Then complete silence. It lasted longer than applause. The kind of silence that follows something sacred. The kind that doesn't ask for celebration, only understanding. Clara stared at the screen, eyes wide, then slowly turned to her father. He exhaled and looked at her, and smiled. For the first time in 3 years, Clara laughed out loud. The kind of laugh that cracked open the air like a sunbeam. The crowd burst into cheers. Some stood. Veterans in the audience saluted. Children clapped. Even a few of Bo's supporters dropped their phones in awe. But Caleb didn't move. He stayed prone a moment longer, eyes closed. Because in that silence, he heard her. Sarah's voice. Soft, proud, eternal. You came home, love. You kept the promise. Emma Caldwell stood at the edge of the firing line, hand over her mouth. She wasn't crying, but something deep inside her had shifted. She'd seen soldiers shoot. She'd seen competitors win. But this was different. This wasn't just a shot. It was a release. Backstage, Bo shoved open the equipment room door, knocking a cart sideways. The technician scrambled to stand. You said that gust would throw him. The tech panicked. He read the trees, man. He didn't even look at the readout he adjusted before it fired. Liar, Bo shouted. You lost, said a calm voice behind him. Bo turned. Emma stood in the doorway holding a tablet. Everything you touched, she said evenly, was recorded. Your sabotage, your unauthorized adjustments. I'll be turning it in unless you walk out right now and forfeit the title with grace. Bo's face went pale. You don't have that kind of authority, he hissed. I do, she said, lifting the tablet. And I'll use it. Or, she stepped forward, lowering her voice, or you admit what everyone out there already knows. He won. Clean. Bo stared at her jaw working. Then he shoved past her and kept walking. On the range, Caleb stood now, Clara's hand wrapped in his. The announcer's voice returned. Ladies and gentlemen, "Your new record holder for Station 10, Caleb Brooks." Cheers roared. But Caleb didn't raise his arms. He didn't bask. He simply turned to his daughter and nodded, because the applause wasn't the victory. She was. That evening, long after the crowd had left and the cameras had shut down, Caleb and Clara sat alone on the edge of the now empty field. The wind had settled. The trees were quiet. Clara leaned her head against his shoulder. "Did you hear her too?" she asked softly. He didn't answer, but he placed his hand over hers, the ring still on his finger. And in the deepening dusk, father and daughter sat in silence, not because they had nothing to say, but because they didn't need to. By late afternoon, Elite Ridge had emptied. The banners still fluttered in the breeze. Empty coffee cups littered the benches, and the echo of the final shot still seemed to hang in the air like distant thunder refusing to fade. Inside the control room, Emma Caldwell sat alone at the surveillance desk. The door was locked. Her face was lit only by the glow of multiple screens as she scrubbed through hours of footage, every camera angle, every technician's keystroke, every flicker on the calibration monitor. There was no longer any doubt. The system had been tampered with twice. First at Station 4, where a slight leftward tilt had been coded into the motorized target rig. Then at Station 6, where a 0.07-second delay had been introduced just before Caleb's shot. Emma clicked the screen still. Her jaw tightened. Not with anger, but something heavier. Shame. Because she hadn't stopped it. She'd suspected, but let it go too far. She opened a secured email window, began typing a report to the oversight board, complete with timestamps, evidence files, and one simple recommendation: disqualify Bo Easton. Revoke his standing. Permanently. Before hitting send, she paused, then added one more sentence. In his silence, Caleb Brooks honored the spirit of this range more than any champion ever has. She hit send, then leaned back, exhaling a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Outside in the soft amber wash of golden hour, Clara Brooks sat on the hood of their truck, swinging her legs slowly back and forth. She wasn't talking, wasn't sketching, just smiling. It was the kind of smile that started in the eyes quiet and unshakable. Caleb stood a few feet away talking with Brady, but his eyes kept drifting back to his daughter, as if afraid the smile might vanish again like it had so many times before. Brady clapped him on the shoulder. "You did good." Caleb shook his head. "She did." Brady gave a knowing smile. "You both did. You gave her something no therapist, no medication ever could." Caleb looked at him. What a reason to believe in peace again. They stood in silence a moment longer, watching Clara as she leaned back and stared up at the sky. Then Caleb said, "Thank you. For everything." Brady shrugged. "You'd have done the same for me." Caleb nodded. "Still," Brady added, "I can't wait to see Bo's face when he finds out Emma filed that report. He already knows." Brady raised an eyebrow. How Caleb looked toward the building, toward the control tower. "She doesn't play games," he said. And she saw him clearly today. Back inside, Emma walked through the now empty corridors of Elite Ridge, clipboard in hand. The day had drained her more than any battlefield. As she stepped out into the courtyard, she spotted Clara, alone, at peace. She walked over quietly. "Hey." Clara turned. Her eyes brightened. "Hi, Miss Emma." Emma smiled. "Can I sit?" Clara scooted over on the hood, patting the spot beside her. They sat in companionable silence for a while. Then Emma said, "You were incredible today." Clara looked down, bashful. "I didn't do anything. You watched everything. You noticed things most adults would miss, and you believed when it mattered." Clara thought for a moment. "I used to think being strong meant being loud." Emma nodded. "A lot of people think that." my mom used to say. Strength isn't noise. It's what you carry when no one's watching. Emma looked at her. She was wise. Clara nodded. She was also stubborn. They both chuckled. Then Emma asked softly, "Can I ask you something?" "Sure. When your dad took the shot today, what did you see?" Clara didn't hesitate. "I saw a man who wasn't afraid anymore." Emma blinked. The answer hit harder than she expected. Clara looked up at the sky. "I think he's free now." Later that evening, Caleb stood in the shadow of the observation deck, looking out across the field. The targets had all been cleared. The range was quiet. Emma joined him. "I filed the report," she said simply. He nodded. "I know you knew," she added. "About the sabotage." "I did." "Why didn't you say anything?" He shrugged. "The moment I do, it becomes about them, about the fight, not the purpose." Emma studied him. "You could have lost." "But I didn't." They stood in silence a moment longer. Then she said, "You changed something here today." "I didn't come to change anything." "No," she said. "But sometimes the truth changes people anyway." Caleb turned to her, the setting sun catching the side of his face. "I'm not a champion," he said. "No," she agreed. "You're something rarer." She reached out and offered a simple, formal military salute, sharp, precise, full of meaning. Caleb hesitated, then returned it, not as a gesture of ego, but of mutual understanding, a shared language, a shared past. That night, back at the cabin, Caleb placed the Remington and the TAC-50 into a secure storage locker. He didn't lock it out of fear. He locked it with reverence, like placing a flag back into its case. Clara sat at the kitchen table drawing something in her notebook. When he walked by, she turned it toward him. It was a picture of him. Not in uniform, not with a rifle, but sitting under a tree with her beside him reading. She had written 3 words underneath it in thick pencil. "We are safe." Caleb didn't speak. He just crouched down, hugged her gently, and let the silence settle between them, rich, complete, unbreakable. The morning after the competition, the air around Elite Ridge felt different, lighter. Not because the crowd was gone, not because the cameras had stopped, but because something had been lifted. The truth. It had spoken not in declarations or press statements, but in silence, in the space between one man's breath and a bullet's path. But the official exhibition, hosted for charity with sponsors, veterans, and wounded heroes in attendance, was still on the calendar. One final event. One final shot. Caleb hadn't planned on attending. He thought his journey had ended with the ring on his finger and his daughter's smile. But when Emma called that morning and said simply, "They want you to fire the last shot for the kids watching," he couldn't say no. He didn't do it for the audience. He did it because Clara was watching, and because Sarah would have wanted it that way. By noon, the range was buzzing again, but this time with something different. No hecklers, no arrogant grins, just quiet reverence. Veterans in wheelchairs lined the front row. A mother held her son's hand tight. Teenagers in ROTC uniforms sat with straight backs. It wasn't about scores today. It was about remembrance and resilience. Caleb stepped onto the platform, wearing the same green jacket, same steel composure, but there was something softer in his eyes. The announcer kept it short. "Today's final honorary shot will be taken by Mr. Caleb Brooks, on behalf of every veteran who never got to come home, and every child who still carries their echo." Silence fell. Caleb lay prone, the TAC-50 once more nestled against his shoulder. The target was 800 yards away this time, barely visible. The shot was symbolic. He knew that. But that didn't mean it didn't matter. He adjusted the scope, felt the warmth of the ring against the trigger guard. He was ready. Until Dad. The voice tore across the range, small and bright like a bell. Everyone turned. "Clara." She had broken from the side barricade, slipped past a startled volunteer, and was now running straight toward the platform. Emma stepped forward to intercept, but Caleb raised a hand just slightly, and Emma stopped. Clara skidded to a halt beside him, breathless. Caleb lifted his head. "What's wrong?" She shook her head, eyes brimming with something that wasn't panic, but something deeper. "Don't shoot yet," she whispered. "Not until I say so." He blinked. "What do you mean?" She stepped closer and reached into her jacket pocket, pulling out a folded scrap of paper. She pressed it into his hand. He opened it slowly. It was a handwritten note in Sarah's looping cursive. Faded. Water-stained. "One day when the world finally hears your silence, make sure Clara knows it spoke for love." Caleb didn't move. The moment caught in his throat and his chest and his trigger finger. He looked at Clara. "Where did you find this?" She sniffled, tucked behind the mirror, the one she used for therapy. The crowd was watching now, but they weren't restless. They were still, because they saw something sacred unfolding. Caleb looked back, downrange, then back at Clara. Then he nodded. "You ready now?" he asked her. Clara wiped her eyes and said, clear and calm, "Now." He exhaled and pulled the trigger. Boom! The sound didn't echo this time. It landed. Solid. Final. The screen didn't flash numbers. It didn't need to. Instead, it lit up with a single word. Home. Applause rose, not explosive, but sustained. The kind that said, "We saw something that matters." Clara wrapped her arms around him as he sat up. He hugged her close, burying his face into her shoulder. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. But the tears that touched his cheek were not sorrow. They were release. Later, as the crowd dispersed and the stage was disassembled, Caleb and Clara walked alone toward the old Ford truck. Emma intercepted them halfway. She handed Caleb a manila envelope. From the board, she said, "They're offering you an honorary lifetime membership. Private lane. Full discretion." Caleb looked at the envelope, then back at her. "I didn't come for perks. I know she said. That's why it matters." He tucked the envelope into his jacket. Then, to Emma's surprise, he added, "I'd like to use the lane, but not for me." She raised an eyebrow. "For who? For kids like Clara, and vets who forgot how to breathe." Emma smiled. "Then we'll call it the Quiet Aim Lane." Clara beamed. "That's what I named Dad's practice journal." Emma winked. "Then it's official." That night, back at the cabin, Caleb sat beside the fireplace, the ring still on his finger, the paper note from Sarah resting beside a cup of tea. Clara was curled up on the couch, sketching a new picture. She held it up. It showed a long field, a father and daughter, and a single word written in the sky above safe. Caleb took it from her, studied it, then whispered, "That's what we are now." And as the fire cracked and the pine trees swayed gently outside, silence filled the room. Not the silence of grief, but the kind that holds peace. And a promise kept. They called it the Ghost Arrow. Not officially, of course. But within 48 hours of the honorary exhibition, Caleb Brooks' final shot had become legend. Clips of the moment, Clara's voice calling out Caleb, slipping on the blackened ring, the long breath before the trigger had gone viral. But it wasn't just about the accuracy. It wasn't just about hitting the target. It was about why he shot. There had been no sponsor logos, no fist pumps, no ego. Only a father, a daughter, and a silence so powerful it spoke louder than any speech. And in that silence, others began to speak. Across the country, something unexpected happened. Veterans, many long forgotten, many still fighting their own ghosts, began sharing their stories. In Pennsylvania, a retired Army medic wrote in the comment section, "My granddaughter asked why he closed his eyes before he fired." I told her, because sometimes we aim through memory, not sight. In Texas, a Marine who hadn't spoken to his children in years sent them the video with 2 words I understand. A former sniper from Kentucky uploaded a quiet video response, a single shot, and a salute. Within 3 days, Caleb's name wasn't trending because he was a champion. It was because he had become a symbol of healing without a spotlight. At Elite Ridge, Emma Caldwell watched it all unfold from her office window. She had seen war change men, seen pride ruin careers, seen ambition silence meaning. But this was different. She clicked open a new tab and began designing a flyer for something she hadn't thought possible a week ago. Quiet Aim, a free training program for veterans and children with PTSD, led by Caleb Brooks. Launching soon, and at the bottom, in italics, sometimes silence is the loudest strength. Meanwhile, in the woods of Oregon, Caleb wasn't thinking about virality or headlines. He was repairing a fence post, hammering quietly under the gray sky, while Clara brushed pine needles from the porch steps. Their life hadn't changed in any material way. The truck was still old, the rifles were still locked away, and dinner still consisted of canned stew and toast. But something had changed. Clara laughed more freely now. She asked questions without fear. She wore her mother's necklace again. And at night, before bed, she'd whisper things like, "You didn't just break a record, Dad. You broke something open." Brady Cook stopped by on the 3rd day after the shot, leaning against his truck with a smile. "You're a celebrity now," he teased. Caleb didn't even glance up from the fence line. "You always said I'd go viral for tripping over a root and shooting myself." Well, I was close. Brady stepped closer, holding up a printout. "Emma asked me to give you this." Caleb took it, scanned it. Quiet Aim program. Free instruction for children of military families. Bi-weekly sessions. Limited to 10 students per cycle. Instructor Caleb Brooks. Below that, a testimonial from a parent. "My son lost his words when his father didn't return. But after just 1 day with Caleb, he whispered, 'I want to aim like him.'" Caleb folded the paper and slipped it into his jacket. "I don't teach for praise," he said. "I know," Brady said. "You teach because you never stopped being a soldier. You just changed battlefields." Caleb gave him a long look, then with the faintest smile. "You ever consider being a co-instructor?" Brady grinned. "Already packed my vest." That Sunday at a community center just outside Salem, the first session of Quiet Aim began. 10 children, 4 veterans, and 1 man in a faded green jacket. No media, no fanfare, just silence and focus. Clara stood by with a clipboard officially labeled Assistant Coach, though her most important job was handing out juice boxes and encouragement. She wore a baseball cap embroidered with a new logo, a single arrow flying into the wind. At the end of the session, a boy named Ethan, 7 years old father killed in Afghanistan, approached Caleb. "You were in a war, huh?" he asked. Caleb knelt beside him. "Yes." "Did you shoot bad guys?" Caleb paused, then said softly, "I aimed for peace. But sometimes peace hides." The boy thought for a moment, then smiled. "Did you find it?" Caleb looked over at Clara laughing with another little girl over spilled juice, then back at the boy. "I think it found me." Later that night, Caleb returned to the porch and sat down beside Clara. The sun had nearly dipped below the tree line, casting long shadows across the quiet land. She handed him a folded sheet of paper. "New sketch?" he asked. She nodded. He opened it. It was a drawing of their cabin, the training field, and a circle of kids aiming toward targets shaped like stars. Above it in her handwriting, "Every arrow remembers its archer." Caleb didn't speak. He just wrapped his arm around her shoulders and pulled her close. And for the first time since the fire, since Sarah's voice had gone silent, he let himself believe that maybe not just for her, but for both of them, The war was truly over. 2 weeks after Caleb Brooks's final shot, Elite Ridge Shooting Range prepared for its most unexpected press event in years. But it wasn't being held for a championship. It wasn't a launch party, a shooting seminar, or even a fundraiser. It was something quieter, something heavier, a reckoning. The email went out to all members, special announcement and ceremony. This Friday, 3 p.m. attendance encouraged. No names were given, no headlines teased, but whispers ran wild. Bo Easton hadn't been seen since the day of the exhibition. His locker emptied, his parking spot vacant. His name, once printed on the brochures and embroidered on club jackets, had quietly vanished. In his place, the name Caleb Brooks had begun to rise, not because he claimed it, but because others offered it. On Friday afternoon, Caleb stood at the entrance of the range, hands tucked in the pockets of his jacket. Clara stood beside him in her quiet aim cap, gripping a notepad covered in doodles and numbers. Her eyes were focused, serious, just like her mother's used to be before a presentation. Emma Caldwell met them at the doorway. She wore her full uniform. Her expression was unreadable, but her voice held warmth. "You ready?" she asked. Caleb nodded once. Emma led them into the main hall, a room usually filled with noise clutter and bright sponsor signs. Today, it had been stripped bare, except for a podium, a flag, and a single chair placed directly in front of the crowd. That chair was reserved for Caleb. The room filled with over 120 people, veterans, instructors, board members, families, former students. Some stood. Some sat. No one spoke. The lights dimmed. Emma stepped to the microphone. "Most of you know me," she began. "Some of you trained under me. Some of you questioned me. Today I'm not here as your range commander." She paused. "I'm here as a witness." Murmurs rippled. Emma continued. 2 weeks ago, in front of this community, a man stepped onto our field. Not to seek fame, not to challenge a title, but to fulfill a promise to his daughter, to his fallen wife, and to something greater than any leaderboard can measure. She turned, slightly meeting Caleb's eyes. "I've reviewed the footage, the records, the sabotage, and more importantly, I've reviewed the silence, his silence. Because sometimes silence isn't weakness." Her voice strengthened. "It's integrity." A few veterans in the crowd nodded solemnly. Emma took a breath. With the approval of the Elite Ridge Board of Ethics and Oversight, and in collaboration with the National Shooting Federation and the Veterans Council of Oregon, we are issuing the following public statement. She unfolded a paper, her voice steady. Effective immediately, all competitive titles previously held by Bo Easton are rescinded. All Elite Ridge records associated with falsified results are voided. A permanent ban from competition is in place. Evidence of tampering has been submitted to the Ethics Board for formal review. The room was silent. Emma folded the paper and continued. Furthermore, the Elite Ridge 500-yard bullseye record now officially belongs to Caleb Brooks. Clara gripped her notepad tightly. Caleb didn't move. Emma stepped aside as a younger instructor brought forward a small plaque, not gilded, not flashy. Just a slab of wood engraved with Caleb Brooks, quiet aim, steady heart, 1,500 yards. Station 10, 10.0, April 22nd. The instructor offered it. Caleb took it slowly, his fingers tracing the edges, not with pride, but with reverence, as if holding something not earned, but borrowed from those who'd never return. He stepped up to the mic, looked out at the crowd, then said simply, "I didn't come here to win anything." A beat of silence. I came because a little girl asked if I could show her that strength wasn't loud, and because a woman I loved believed that silence, when it holds purpose, can move mountains. He glanced at Clara. She was right. He held the plaque at his side and nodded, once then stepped away. No applause. But from the far side of the room, a chair scraped softly against the floor. An older man stood Vietnam vet, judging by the insignia on his jacket. He straightened his back, raised his hand in a crisp, formal salute. Another man stood. Then another. Until half the room, gray-haired, uniformed, scarred, silent, rose to their feet. Not clapping. Saluting. Caleb didn't return the gesture. Instead, he turned to Clara, knelt beside her, and placed the plaque in her hands. "You hold this," he whispered. "It belongs to all of us." She nodded, tears in her eyes. And as the room stood still, the past and present met in a moment no trophy could ever replace. Afterward, outside in the afternoon sun, Emma approached. "That was one hell of a speech," she said softly. Caleb shrugged. "Didn't feel like one. That's what made it perfect." She hesitated, then pulled a folded envelope from her jacket. "What's this?" he asked. "Official invitation to speak at the Veterans Unity Summit in D.C. keynote." "I don't give speeches. You just did," she said. "And it changed people." He looked at the envelope, then pocketed it. "I'll think about it." Emma smiled. "Good. Because I think the country needs to hear from someone who never wanted to be heard." Caleb nodded. Then as Clara climbed into the truck beside him, he turned and added, "But only if Clara reads the first line." Emma chuckled. "Deal." That evening back at the cabin, the sun dipped below the horizon. The plaque now sat above the fireplace, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. Clara curled beside him on the couch, drawing stars. "You didn't win," she said suddenly. "You taught them." Caleb looked down at her. Taught them what she smiled. That the loudest shot doesn't come from the gun, it comes from the promise behind it. And in the silence that followed, Caleb closed his eyes. Not in pain, not in memory, but in peace. 3 months later, the old barn on Caleb Brooks's property no longer smelled of rust and rain. Instead, it smelled like purpose. The once abandoned structure had been cleaned, patched, and transformed into something new, a training hall unlike any other. No glass trophies, no digital simulators, no loud commands, just woodwind and silence. A hand-painted sign hung above the wide double doors. Quiet Aim Training Center, where stillness becomes strength. Inside 10 children ranging from age 6 to 16 sat cross-legged on mats, each holding a wooden practice rifle. Beside them stood 5 veterans, each with different scars, different stories, but the same patient calm in their eyes. At the front of the group, Caleb stood with Clara by his side. She wore her usual baseball cap, her mother's old pendant, and a clipboard tucked under her arm. She was no longer the quiet little girl hiding behind her father's jacket. She was Coach Clara now. "Welcome back," she said clearly. "Today we're going to start with breath work. 3 counts and hold for 2, release on 5. The students followed. No fidgeting, no distractions, just breath and trust. Caleb watched from the side, arms folded, pride quietly blooming in his chest like spring. It wasn't just that the kids were listening. It was that they believed in themselves, in each other, in something gentle but unshakable. After-class parents gathered under the trees with folding chairs and thermoses. Some had driven hours. A few stayed just to sit quietly on the porch, knowing their children were finally learning the kind of strength that didn't require shouting. Brady Cook was setting up targets behind the barn, whistling as he worked. His beard had grown out a bit, and the limp in his left leg didn't seem to slow him down anymore. "I'll be adding a wind flag station next week," he told Caleb. "Make it subtle," Caleb replied. "We're not training snipers. We're teaching attention." Brady nodded. "Funny how it all turned out, huh? You didn't want to compete, and now you're changing lives one breath at a time." Caleb smiled faintly. "I didn't need an audience. I just needed her to see." He looked over at Clara, who was now helping a younger boy adjust his posture with gentle hands and patient words. She sees Brady said quietly. That afternoon, a visitor arrived. Emma Caldwell pulled up in a government-issued SUV, stepping out with a clipboard and 2 envelopes. She was dressed in civilian clothes, but her posture was still military straight. Caleb met her at the gate. "Don't tell me the range wants me back on the leaderboard," he said with a faint smirk. Emma chuckled. "No, but the Veterans Alliance wants to license your curriculum. I'm not franchising." "I know. This is different. They want to support it." Quietly. Monthly grant, equipment, transportation for students. No press, no obligations. Caleb considered it. "I don't want it turning into a brand." Emma handed him the envelope anyway. "Then use it to build a garden, or add heating, or fix the roof." He tucked the envelope into his back pocket. Then Emma handed over a second one, thicker, heavier. "What's this A letter?" she said. "From the mother of a boy who couldn't speak after his father died overseas. Until last week." Caleb opened it slowly. "Mr. Brooks, my son Evan said 3 words this morning after training with you and Clara. He looked at me, held his wooden rifle, and whispered, 'I feel safe. Thank you for giving me back my boy.'" He folded the letter and held it tightly. Emma added, "The country will keep chasing noise, headlines, arguments, but some of us will remember this." Caleb looked at her. "That's enough." That evening, Clara curled up next to the fire sketching again. The plaque from Elite Ridge still hung above the mantel, but it had been joined by something new, a framed photo. Caleb, Clara, and a circle of smiling children all raising their hands, not in salute, but in quiet promise. She showed him her latest drawing. It was simple, an archer standing on a hill. Eyes closed, arms relaxed, but the arrow had already landed in a distant heart, shown by a tiny beam of light connecting them. Underneath, she had written, "You didn't just aim, Dad. You healed." Caleb placed a hand over hers. "I only had 1 arrow," he said. Clara smiled. "But it found all of us." Later that night, Caleb stepped outside onto the porch. The wind stirred the pine needles. The stars above blinked quietly like old comrades keeping watch. He closed his eyes, breathing in the scent of cedar and firewood. Behind him, Clara's voice floated through the screen door. "Dad want to read the next story together." He turned back inside toward warmth, toward her, toward the only battlefield he still stood upon. Love. Not every hero returns in uniform. Some return in silence. And in that silence, they build something that never falls again. We'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from, and what part of this story touched you the most? If you enjoyed this journey, we invite you to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next one. Every story we share is crafted with heart hope and the quiet belief that kindness still matters. Thank you for spending your time with us. Until next time, stay well, stay kind, and never stop believing in the power of a quiet promise.